Hello and welcome to another episode of Subjectively Correct, a movie podcast where two buddies talk about a couple of films that fit a theme every single episode. I am Josh and I'm joined by my mate Matt.
Hello.
This episode we are talking about documentaries, which was our randomly selected subject from last time, and we have a couple of interesting documentaries to discuss. And we're going to talk about each one as we go, and then at the end we're going to talk about our next theme and our next movies that we'll be preparing for our next episode. So, Matt, you have the earlier film this week. Why don't you take it away and tell us what we're talking about first?
Yes, so my film, my film is called Casting JonBenet, released in 2017. Directed and written by a person called Kitty Green. And, well, it's starring a whole bunch of, like, small-time actors, which I'm not going to be naming. There's no real, like main actors that I could pick out here, so I'm just going to refrain from doing that at all. But because the act of casting those actors is a main thing in this documentary, I'm gonna shout out the casting people on the credits here, which are Annie Hamilton and Brian McCulley, who have apparently also been working on another documentary about this JonBenet Ramsey true crime case before this. And yeah, like I already said, this is a documentary essentially about the, I believe, well-known crime case from 1996 in the USA, where JonBenet Ramsey was killed at 6 years old. So not a very happy subject. It's still regarded as an unsolved case, if I'm not mistaken. And I think because of that and because of the media attention that it got at the time, I was 3 years old, so I didn't know any about this. But from what I learned, apparently this was something that people have talked immensely, and everybody has their own like theories and interpretations. It's one of those cases, which makes this probably a perfect one to investigate with this documentary, which does it in a very unique way. It's not going the regular like true crime route of putting a bunch of, I don't know, newspaper clippings and whatnot in front of your face and having like the people that were involved at the time of investigation or whatever, people that knew the people involved, talk about their experiences, whatnot. It's not going in that like, we're gonna find out what's the truth behind this mystery kind of route. Rather than that, it casts a whole bunch of small-time actors to study the people involved in this case, to play them, under the pretense of making a reenactment of this case. Although this reenactment is just a pretense to get these people into the audition-y roles and interviewing them, having them really learn about these people and giving their own interpretations. This entire movie is the casting process to focus on how these people interpret the real-life people involved in this situation, but also as things go on, they open up more about their own experiences, which all just leads into this becoming less an investigation of this crime case and more, I think, about being human and how we deal with tragedy in different ways and how we talk about these different things. It's going a completely different route than you probably think when you go in. And, the casting does a lot of clever things where they actually because we have multiple actors auditioning for the people for each role. And so we got, for example, for the role of the police that investigated the case at the time. We got actual actors with backgrounds in police work, so they have a bit of an educated or somewhat educated lens to interpret the people at the role that they are supposed to play, etc. I think one of them even straight up says when he was working at the police, the JonBenet Ramsey case was literally used as a showcase to tell new recruits how to not do things and whatnot. So these aren't just like random actors. These are actually people that have some sort of interesting lens to talk about what happened and whatnot. The same way the actors that are auditioning for the parent roles are usually actual people with children, some of which they later reveal also have had, deaths in their family and whatnot. So again, these are all people with interesting points of views and lenses talking about how they deal with tragedy, how different people talk about something as horrible as this without ever actually trying to find the true whatever story of this specific crime. It's all just the basis to bring it all together with. And through all of that, yeah, again, I think it's just a really cool documentary about humanity, about how we deal with shit and how different people deal with different shit. It's cool to see also these actors just some of them more or less, some more, some less, really like flourish in some of their roles. I think one standout for me was actually, I think his name was Dixon White, who was auditioning for a convicted child abusing pedophile who in real world at some point claimed to have a connection to JonBenet Ramsey, which was never like proven. But this actor, through this documentary, auditioned for this role, and he really had a touch on the role, gave a great performance, even though that's, again, not really the point of this documentary. But yeah, there are some really cool actors in here doing a good job. But most of this is sort of where a Talking Heads documentary, but even there, I would say it does a bit more with its presentation and production than you usually expect with a Talking Heads documentary. And at the very end, well, there are a couple smaller reenactments throughout the film. And at the very end, we get a lengthier sequence, but with a more like artistic aesthetic, less trying to be an actual representation of what might have happened or whatever. Where there's a really cool shot that I loved where the different actor auditionees for the same role are all scattered throughout the same set, which made for a really cool visual. And I immediately thought of you, Josh, when I saw this. We have a tiny little dance sequence at the very end, and I know you love dance sequences. But yeah,
and
that's
just because it was awesome in Ex Machina doesn't mean it's awesome in everything.
Listen, I'm always gonna think of you now when I see that shit pop up in a movie where it's not expected. But yeah, that's my little starting ramble. What were your thoughts with this one?
Well, to go off that, I loved that ending piece where throughout the whole doco, you've got these actors who are basically talking to the camera as people who are auditioning for the roles of, the family around JonBenet and the police officers and all that kind of stuff. And so it's interesting because they're talking about, how they research the parts and all that kind of stuff and different theories that they have about what might have happened or what their character that they're auditioning for might have done or might not have done. And then later in the film, as you say, they start talking about their own personal experiences, which they're drawing on for this kind of acting job and for characterization, that sort of thing. And then, that final sequence, I guess, I thought it was kind of, the thing I liked about it was, they'd kind of do this pan across an entire household. And there's multiple versions of each, like the father, the mother, the son, all that kind of stuff. And what I really liked is it kind of played out every single theory that they had along the way. Like I noticed that some of them were, it looked like, in some scenes it looked like one person was the perpetrator, in other scenes it looked like another person was. Like in some scenes it looked like the son was looking guilty, other times he had nothing to do with it. All these things. And there was all these theories that came up during the film as well, which kind of fit into those and fed into those as well. And so I like that. However, I have to say I went in quite skeptical because I do know the story of JonBenet, obviously, because I'm old enough, whatever. I remember it being a big deal.
Yeah.
And I also have a rather solid and passionate hatred of child beauty pageants.
Same.
Which is,
not surprising. Yeah.
I'm sorry to everyone out there who might be into it, but I think it's child abuse just straight up.
Yeah.
If you put your child into a beauty pageant and dress them up like little fucking supermodels, you are abusing your child. That is what I believe, and that's what I'm sticking to. So,
I'm with you.
This subject already is something that I passionately hate. And I think JonBenet was a good representation of that in the instance where there was, yes, it's all unknown what actually happened, but there was, there was some evidence pointing towards some kind of sexual assault as well. There was, it's hard to say who did what and how she was killed or whatever. But at the end of the day, it was a little girl who's 6 years old who, was assaulted and killed. And we don't know by who or anything, and that's fine. But the act itself is just, I think, part of that industry. And they do hint at that a little bit in this doco where some of them are talking about having been a part of that industry and the amount of abuse that happens there and that sort of thing. Not that I want to get bogged down in that, but I was coming into this doco knowing how much I hate the whole freaking industry.
Yeah.
Which is okay. That doesn't mean it's a bad, thing to learn about. And then when it started and it was all these actors basically applying for the roles, I'm like, oh, fuck. The other thing I hate is reenactments.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm like, show me the real footage. Like, this was done in the 90s. Like, we've got plenty of news footage and court footage and everything, I'm sure, of the whole process. I'm like, show me that stuff. And for the first maybe third of the film, I was thinking, oh, this is a real letdown. But
interesting.
To be fair, it won me over by about halfway through because it kind of, the penny didn't drop for me right away, but eventually did drop that, oh no, this is how the film has been, this is how the story is being told. This is the method that they're using to tell the story. And they're not using any real footage or, like you say, anyone who is like, well, I live next door to them and this happened and that happened, none of that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's all just, it's almost a film about, like you say, it's more about humanity and that kind of thing. But the focus on JonBenet is more of a kind of esoteric, wider lens about its impact on a community and on a society, as opposed to the act itself.
Yes.
And I think that comes across as well in the fact that we meet a whole lot of 6-year-old girls who are being cast to play JonBenet, but they're barely in the film at all.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of scenes where there's, the character of JonBenet being played. But other than that, it's not, she's just not a character. And I love that they didn't do too much with those girls talking or anything. I think it was great that she was kind of left out of the conversation in a way, because putting words in a deceased 6-year-old girl's mouth kind of seems a bit weird, I gotta say. So I'm glad that they avoided that, because I thought that was a nice touch. But yeah, it definitely won me over by the end. And like I say, I really enjoyed the end sequence where it was the culmination of basically everything that they've been talking about throughout. And what I like about good documentaries is, what I like about movies in general is more, for me, the storytelling and how you can tell different stories in different ways, and different ways that movies allow you to tell that. And I think documentaries are very much that as well, even though sometimes we might think of documentaries as like a report on an incident or whatever. I think it's very much about storytelling as well. And the really good documentaries tell a story along with the factual kind of evidence stuff. And that's where I agree with you as well, because I think having all these actors who, yeah, some of them were pretty terrible.
Yeah.
You know, no disrespect, but some of them were not suited for that role. Some of them were just a bit over the top. Some of them were really good and like just fucking cool. So they had a good spectrum there, but all of them seemed to either come from the area of Boulder where the incident happened, or, you know, definitely had some kind of personal experience with it, whether it's even just remembering it happened,
Yeah.
or maybe they have been a part of the beauty pageant industry or whatever. Maybe they've had their own trauma that they've gone through that's similar. And so it was really interesting having these actors who are talking about basically getting inside the head of each of the characters they're playing. So, you know, all the guys who are talking about playing the father, and they basically talk about every theory that is around who he was and, you know, what could have happened. Like if he was guilty, how this would have happened, or if he was innocent, how this would have happened. Same with the mother and the son and, you know, basically the rest of the family. And I thought that was a really unique and effective way to tease out that story of essentially something that we don't know anyway. So it is all theory and it is all opinion and it is all guessing. But I thought that was a unique kind of angle to take, of rather than, you know, having a psychologist sitting there saying, well, this might have happened, or
Exactly.
or a forensics expert or something going, well, the evidence says blah, blah, blah. It's cool having, you know, actors who ultimately are people who study human behavior at the end of the day and what makes up people's motivations and all that sort of thing. And, you know, for better or worse, as we said with some of them, but I liked how they each kind of analyzed it, gave their opinions about what they thought has happened, and because that's then informing how they're going to play this character. But then I like how it wasn't until the end of the doco where they started talking about their own personal experiences, where, you know, one of the women who was playing the mum talked about her own experience with assault and how, you know, it was people that she knew and were, you know, friendly and part of her family basically were the people who assaulted her. And that's something to remember when you're talking about assault or playing a character who's involved with assault. Or there was other people who talked about I think there was another lady whose brother had been murdered, and and there was another lady who had like 3 kids had been killed in some way or another. It was pretty intense kind of stuff. Like, you know, these people have been through some shit and have some good, well, not good, but some strong experiences to draw from, I guess, when trying to empathize with the characters around the JonBenet murder. So that was really interesting, I think, as well, because as much as these people technically don't really have anything to do with the facts of the case or anything like that, like you say, it becomes more about, well, what motivates people to do this? And like, there's different theories for each member of the family. And like, so if it was the mum, you know, what motivates a mother to get so frustrated and angry with their child that they might lash out? And so it's interesting hearing different women talk about when they've been in that position, and sure, they haven't killed their kids, but they might have been in a position where they've acted badly and gone, oh crap, I've been pushed to that point because my kids annoy me so much. And I think that's a common thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then there's, you know, stuff about, you know, there was a pretty intense sequence where they were talking about, because there's another theory that the brother did it, the son of the family. And there's 2 points in that story which I thought were really kind of poignant and shocking. And there was this one bit which was they're basically doing a scene where there's a teacher or an authority figure or someone telling the son to like draw their family.
Yeah.
And so he draws their family, but he draws it without himself in it. And so she says to him, like, is that the whole family? And she's like, yeah, that's it, kind of thing. And to me, that just spoke volumes, because that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, so he's feeling like he doesn't even exist in that family. Kind of thing.
I didn't even pick up on that, but yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that's why they get you to do drawings and stuff, because it's like, you know, have you drawn dad as this huge, giant
Yeah.
monster kind of thing, like that might indicate might be some abuse there or something. Or, have you drawn yourself as like small and weak or strong and powerful, or, all those sorts of things are really great indicators onto how how kids are feeling about stuff. And then they go on to talk about how oh, no little boy would be able to smash in a 6-year-old girl's head
Yeah.
with a flashlight kind of thing, with a torch. And then they show these boys who are auditioning, like smacking watermelons with these torches,
Yeah.
and successfully doing it too, like smacking the shit out of them. And you're like, oh, so they kind of are strong enough, that could happen. And so, yeah, I really liked the pacing in that sense, and the way that the story kind of unfolded, because you started off with it just being exclusively about the mother, and she was known to be a little bit intense, and she used to be a beauty pageant queen as well. So it kind of looks like she's living vicariously through her daughter, and again, I think that's child abuse anyway. So I'm like going, yeah, fuck her kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But then we get onto the dad, and it's like, well, yeah, he wasn't necessarily the greatest dude ever, and he had his own demons to deal with, and he had his own opportunity to take advantage of things or cover up things, perhaps, or and then we get eventually onto the son and the brother, and so on and so forth, and the cops involved, and yeah, everyone.
And Santa Claus.
Yeah, Santa Claus as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'd forgotten about Santa Claus. But, but that's where I liked it, because it wasn't like, I like that they always stop short of trying to say this is exactly what happened.
Yes. Yeah.
Or like all the evidence points to X. They just kind of spoke about all the theories and all the different angles. And I think that's kind of the best way to approach something which is literally unknowable. Like,
yeah,
they're not going to prove it by making a documentary. They're not going to solve the case. They're not uncovering new evidence that will make things come to light. Or that's not the point of the doco.
No,
it's basically, like you say, I think it falls more on a broader scope of looking at human beings and different dynamics and how these events might occur within a regular suburban family, like the Ramseys were. And in that sense, I really, really enjoyed it, and it did win me over by the end, even though I started off quite skeptical. But,
it's interesting to hear your expectations beforehand. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say, you expected the actual footage of the time or whatever. When I would have least been interested in that sort of thing. I could read a Wikipedia article if I wanted to.
Well, to be fair, I ended up preferring this because it was, to me, a much more refreshing and not so much surprising, but satisfying kind of idea of storytelling in that sense. Like, I haven't seen a similar story told in this way. We've all seen lots of true crime documentaries or TVs or even news articles or whatever, but this is the first time I've seen a true crime kind of story told in this way. Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting. The closest one I could think of was the Laramie Project. I don't know if you've seen that one.
That doesn't ring a bell.
So there's a movie called The Laramie Project, which was also a documentary. And it was basically about a kid who was killed in the 90s for being gay, essentially. Mm. And he was beaten to death in America. And they ended up making a film based on all the dialogue and everything that was captured from the town's community after the incident. And then they kind of turned those into fictional characters in a way and based it very much on fact, but told a story in a completely different way. It's a really good film. I'd recommend going and see it. It's a hard one because obviously, much like this one, it's not fun subject matter.
Yeah.
But and there's some pretty hardcore kind of statements in there from the community. So, but this kind of reminded me of that because it was just a different way of telling a similar kind of story. And I really enjoyed it for that reason. So, yeah.
I think because you were saying that, of course, these are hard, heavy subjects. And I think especially because of that, putting this extensive human filter between the like quote unquote facts and yourself, as this movie does, really makes it way easier to process it emotionally. You're not just you're not just presented like most documentaries do with the true with the alleged cold facts and just have to deal with that shit. No, you're able to overhear the conversations of people, processing it themselves. So you're kind of part of that. Uh,
Mm.
I feel like that helps a lot with, even while having this heavy subject, making it much more palatable or whatever you want to call it.
Well, to I guess relate it a different way, because the director of this is actually an Australian director,
Oh,
and it was cool for me anyway. Just at the very start of the film, it comes up with like Screen Australia as one of the producers,
right. Yeah.
who's like a body over here who funds movies. So that's cool. But it made me think about the Lindy Chamberlain case, which is obviously a big one in Australia. It's the Dingo Took My Baby one that everyone's
Oh,
heard of, which happened in, I think, the 70s or the 80s, and maybe in the 60s. I can't remember, to be honest. But it's that infamous now. Like, everyone knows the story of a family goes camping and they claim that their baby was taken by a dingo and killed, and the body was never actually found.
and then it
And
became a Seinfeld joke.
well, it's become a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And and especially in Australia, probably not in the rest of the world, there have been loads of, you know, TV expose kind of
Right.
things
Yeah.
where we interview Lindy Chamberlain, who's the mother, and we get all the hard facts from her and whatever. And so I've seen loads of those actual people talking about it. And the whole time, it never really makes a difference, because you still think, well, no one knows what happened. There's no
Yeah.
proof. There's no way of telling.
Hmm.
We don't know if, there is evidence that suggests foul play by humans as opposed to a wild animal. But there's also, then we don't know. Maybe it was a wild animal. Nobody fucking knows. So all those, exposés and things and like actual footage and all that kind of stuff really doesn't help at all tell the story or shed any new light on the story, or, make it more interesting even. So
Yeah.
that's where I think, as an antithesis to that, this movie, which is a similar case where there's, no one's ever going to know the truth anymore. It's too late. There's no evidence. No one's ever going to know. So I kind of, with that in mind, I think it's probably a good thing they didn't just lean on footage of, the parents professing their innocence or whatever, because you'd still be there going, yeah, but I don't know. So
Exactly. And
this way we get more of a in-depth kind of, we get to tease apart different possibilities and explore different options without necessarily without an agenda of proving or disproving anything.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually what I love about this as well, because yeah, we're not like focusing on finding out every little detail of this thing and then what. Like the most important thing about to deal how we deal as humans with heavy things, with tragedy, is to figure out where we go on from there. And by learning
Mm.
the different personal experiences from the auditionees and how they moved on from their personal tragedies, I think really gives this a sort of like healthy and hopeful step forward. I think that's what I appreciate a lot about this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
so
and even aside from all of this like emotional psychological shit, it's also just kind of cool as a documentary of like how actors work, if you're into filmmaking, you can also get this from this, like genuinely. Uh,
yeah.
you know. So not the main draw here, but it's there, which is cool.
Again, I think that's part of why because I think about all the choices that were made in this documentary, and things like how I mentioned that, the girls who are playing JonBenet, they're only there at the very beginning and at the very end, and they're not a big part of the whole
Yeah.
doco. And I feel like that was a very purposeful choice,
Yeah.
or I hope it is anyway, because I feel like it has a very good, or it shapes the doco in a certain way where it avoids being a bit shit or a bit shitter because of it. Like, there's one thing to have kids playing characters and whatever, but I think it's, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of child actors talking about being actors anyway, but they kind of kept it limited to necessary amounts, and that's about it. And I kind of like that because, yeah, the little kids who played the brother, I think there was a few of them, and they all had like maybe a line each, and that was it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, and then they just got on and played the role, kind of thing. So we didn't get 6-year-olds analyzing the humanity of this stuff, which I thought was a good idea. We got adults who have had experiences and have a bit of wisdom and, have a bit of insight, for better or worse. Like, I didn't agree with all of them, and I didn't, necessarily connect with every single actor in this, but I appreciated all the different viewpoints and different opinions and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And different lived experiences as well, because they all had something different they were bringing to the role. So yeah, ultimately, I really liked it. I thought it was great. I don't really have much bad to say about it at all, So yeah, good choice.
Thank you.
Especially because it's that different kind of storytelling. Like, there's some good docos out there, but I love docos which, tell their stories in a unique way. And I think this one managed to do that. So yeah.
I figured you would appreciate the like uniqueness of it. Yeah. But further from that, what would you give it as a cold number rating?
You know what? This is going to be a high one for me. I think I'd even go to a 4.5, like a 9 out of 10.
Hell yeah.
I'm not sure what's holding me back from the last bit, to be honest, but I don't feel like, just in my gut, I don't feel like it's quite a 10.
Yeah, I get that.
But I feel like it's definitely knocking on the door, How about you?
Yeah, you know what? I might follow you here. This was my second watch of this film. The first time I saw it, I gave it the solid 8 out of 10, the 4 out of 5. But I was thinking of raising it on this rewatch as well. And, if you're doing it, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to be there with the 9 out of 10 as well. It's a really, really cool and memorable documentary.
Yeah. And I think for anyone listening, if you haven't watched it already, it is worth watching just for the different style of documentary making.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Just great soundtrack. I love the soundtrack. I'm actually probably gonna pop the soundtrack in like on its own later on. I love the.
Honestly, I can't remember the soundtrack, if I'm honest.
It was very sparsely used, but it was a lot of like nice, piano and string and whatever. Nice orchestral shit.
I don't remember it being bad, so
yeah,
that's something.
Yeah. But yeah, cool. Now that we've talked about that devastating subject, let's actually go to something I think much more hopeful and positive with your film.
Yeah, with a few little, I think,
there are bumps, but ultimately hopeful.
Yeah, a few bumps. So yeah, the documentary that I brought was a recent one from 2023 called Chasing Amy. This is essentially a documentary about the film called Chasing Amy. So we're kind of going to talk about both in a way, because I know Matt, you went and watched both the film and the documentary, which is great. So this is a debut documentary from filmmaker Sav Rogers, who starred in it, wrote it, directed it. It's their little baby, and it's mostly about their experience with the film Chasing Amy, because ultimately Sav Rogers is a self-identified queer identifying person who has grown up with identity issues or concerns, whatever, things to work out during their teenage years and then into the adulthood. And the movie Chasing Amy apparently helped them quite a lot with basically determining their own sexuality and gender identity and all that kind of stuff. That's all, all that good stuff that's really easy to figure out and doesn't take any thinking at all. I say it jokingly. And so, yeah, the film, to start off with, the film Chasing Amy is a film by Kevin Smith from the 90s. I think it's his third film. And it's essentially about this guy who's played by Ben Affleck, who's a straight white dude, who meets this girl played by Joey Lauren Adams, who is a gay white woman. And it's in the 90s, so it's a little bit dated now as far as how woke it may or may not be. But it is actually, this is one thing I'm interested in hearing about other people's opinions, because when it was new, it was pretty ahead of its time and very progressive in even just talking about homosexuality or bisexuality or sexuality in general. And basically, so these two characters essentially fall in love with each other, and they go through this tumultuous kind of relationship where Joey Lauren Adams' character is dealing with the fact that she's kind of painted herself with an identity of being a lesbian and what that means and how she's limiting herself that way. And then Holden, who is Ben Affleck's character, is basically dealing with the fact that he's a straight white guy and all the homosexual stuff and previous boyfriends and all this kind of stuff just freak him out, and he's having a hard time being insecure about other people's sexual exploits and whatever. So that's a very brief summary of Chasing Amy. So then we come back to the documentary, and because that film dealt with things about bisexuality and lesbianism and all these things up and down, and there's a few male gay characters in there as well, and it kind of touches on a number of identity related things. Sav Rogers identified with it and tells the story about how they figured a lot out about themselves through watching the film Chasing Amy. And then now, as they're older and they're, getting into being a filmmaker and all that kind of thing, they decided to make this film about that very thing. So this documentary is basically them talking about all of that, talking about their own relationship and their own gender identity journey, and hooking up them with Kevin Smith, who made the film, and interviewing him and interviewing Joey Lauren Adams, who was in the film, and, all this kind of stuff. So there's some really interesting, I think, interviews in here. And there's a lot of interviews as well with more queer filmmakers who perhaps don't like the fact that a straight white man, i.e. Kevin Smith, made a film that is better known for being the lesbian film than, say, a more authentic film that a couple of lesbians might have made with all their friends, and it's more a genuine depiction of homosexuality in the 90s or whatever. So that's very interesting. I myself have always loved the film Chasing Amy because, like I say, it has been very progressive. The thing I do like about it, there's a couple of key reasons why I think it holds up and it kind of withstands criticism. And part of that is Joey Lauren Adams' character in this. She is never, her character is never compromised throughout the film, and she's always in control of her own involvement or her own identity and her own activities and everything. She's never, I guess, the victim, which I think is great. She is the one who is in control, and it's everyone else who's a fucking idiot, basically. I don't mind that Kevin Smith told this as a white straight man, because he is a white straight man. So he's telling a story that means something to him. And apparently a lot of the story of Chasing Amy is based on his own relationship that he had at the time with Joey Lauren Adams, because they were a real life couple. And they broke up. And so part of his way of dealing with that was to write a story about it and make it into a movie, because that's what he does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of criticism that it's kind of like walking on eggshells a bit, because there is a lot of criticism that can be leveled at this film. And I kind of agree with it. I can see both sides, but for me, I don't mind it existing because it's not stopping anything else from existing as well. It's just telling a different type of story from a different perspective. The thing I loved about the documentary is that, yes, it is about Sav Rogers and their journey, and it's quite an uplifting, cool journey, I think. Like it, I like to think it all worked out in the end for them. So, but then there's some really intense stuff in there because I like that Kevin Smith appeared to be really open and welcoming and happy to talk about everything in this film, even though he doesn't come off the best at times. Like, I think there are some scenes in this and some parts where it's not very flattering for Kevin Smith, but it's very honest and feels like it's very real. Not to mention then there's a very, I think the thing I always think about with this doco is the interview with Joey Lauren Adams that they did like on their own. And my God, it kind of like kind of brings tears to my eye just thinking about it, because they talk about the whole Harvey Weinstein thing and how women were treated in Hollywood at the time. And Joey Lauren Adams was definitely a part of that, and, you know, around when all that stuff was happening. And yeah, she gives an interview which is really honest and raw and really cool as far as, you know, how open she is about it. And to the point that I think Sav Rogers kind of takes some time off from making the doco after doing that interview.
Yeah.
Because it's just too intense. And they're like, I gotta chill out and just go hang out with my girlfriend kind of thing. Like, so yeah, it's definitely not always easy viewing, I think, but I think ultimately it has a pretty uplifting and positive kind of message about finding your own identity and being true to yourself and being honest. And yeah, that's why I think I really liked it, because it was just nailed it on every point in my book. But what did you think, Matt?
Yes, I have thoughts. So when you presented this as your pick for this episode, I noticed that I did have the documentary Chasing Amy on my watch list already. Never seen the original movie before, though. I think I mentioned off mic that I've have seen. I want to give a little shout out. I have seen a video by a YouTuber called Evasive with the fantastic title, I made a lesbian and bisexual woman watch Chasing Amy, which is honestly a pretty good video. But yeah, they react to it. It's a bit about the history and whatnot. That was my context to Chasing Amy. And in that video, it was also mentioned that the documentary was at the time in the works. So I heard about it before. If it wasn't for this podcast, I probably wouldn't have seen the actual movie beforehand, but I did go out of my way to do that. And I mean, I can't tell you this much. I didn't hate it. I can absolutely see where the divisive criticisms are coming from. Some of them are, I believe, very much warranted, but the movie is not doing everything wrong. I think it does different parts very well, different parts not so well. So, you know, like everything, it's not perfect, whatever. I think it's fair to say, if you want to hear like, again, the representation of the lesbian character isn't the absolute worst, but of course, I think it's obvious. If you want a really good story about the queer female experience, you would probably want a story told by a woman. But what I do think this movie, the original movie from 1997, does well for the most part, is the point of view of the heterosexual dude bro guy who gets confronted in terms of his ideas about sexuality and whatnot. I think there's some pretty good stuff in that sense. Is that the story that needs the pedestal or whatever, the podium? Probably not as much as the lesbian experience, but it's there. It's not too bad. I think there's some value in here. But ultimately, I don't think that matters in terms of the documentary Chasing Amy at all. Right off the bat, I loved this documentary through and through. From a like very basic point of view, I love how this documentary is about the fact that the media we consume doesn't have to be perfect to mean something to us. I love the idea of exploring how we take in culture and art, how we process it, and how we go on from that in our own personal growth, whatever, which also includes moving on from it. But I love how this movie is about all of that, but never being resentful of, you know, what meant something for us in the past. Chasing Amy is not a perfect film, neither in it as a movie, as well as, you know, whatever went behind the curtains. As we learn through this documentary, as we learn through the interviews. But it can still mean something to somebody, as did for the director Sav Rogers. And I think it's super super like honestly heartwarming to see somebody acknowledge that, move on from that, have no resentment, and just because we all have that. I think we all have like quote unquote problematic media in our past that had an effect of how we grow, of how we developed. And that's fine.
Mm.
That's just life. And I love that as like the core of this documentary for me. That's like my biggest draw from this. If we're going to the specifics of really Seth Rogers as a person, talking about his own experience throughout life, throughout transitioning, throughout all of that, and talking with Kevin Smith personally and Joey Lauren Adams personally. You mentioned it already. The Joey Lauren Adams interview is incredibly raw and candid, like more so than I ever expected. And having
Yeah.
that side by side, or rather back to back with the interviews where both of them, Kevin Smith and
Yes.
Joey Lauren Adams, are together, is like night and day. It's crazy. It
Well,
was,
and not to cut you off, but that is something I love about that, where
yeah,
you get an interview with Kevin Smith and Joey Lauren Adams at the same time, where it's mostly Kevin Smith talking,
yeah,
and he's talking about, oh, dealing with his relationship stuff with Joey and all this kind of stuff. And she's kind of just smiling and nodding away in the background.
yeah, yeah,
And then cut to the next day, she has an interview with Sav just on her own, and she's angry and pissed off and emotional and just talking about everything from a completely different perspective.
yeah.
And I love how she even says, I'm not taking anything away from Kevin, like that was his experience and that's cool. And I'm not blaming him for that, but this was mine and it was fucking different. Like,
Yeah.
and I loved that contrast.
For sure. It was really like a moment where, for a second, it seems like, okay, this is where the documentary is gonna break. It's over. The way that Joey Lauren Adams starts the interview basically with like uh, straight up confronting Seth Rogers, basically like, "What do you want from me?" Well, like, what can I tell you? What the fuck do you want from me? Are you just gonna give me the same old basic questions or whatever? But they managed to give her the complete like time to air out her experience fully with all the emotions that belong there, and still find a way in terms of the documentary and in terms of Seth Rogers' own experience, go on to from that to a, I guess, like productive, hopeful path. It wasn't like it didn't break. It didn't like end up this never meet your heroes kind of thing. Here, all the magic is lifted and it's gone and it's over. No, it's being processed very maturely to be made another step in this growth to move on from. And yeah, it's so fucking good. Yeah, I love this documentary wholeheartedly. God,
Well, and sorry, go on.
I love reading and hearing about how we interpret and how we consume, I guess, art and media in general. And I think this documentary is like a prime example, a prime investigation of that, with a real life personal example for that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love how personal it is for Sav Rogers as the filmmaker, because that just brings a whole. What I love most about this doco is just, again, I talk about like honesty and kind of just realness, for want of a better word. Like, I feel like this is one of the most kind of open and honest kind of stories that maybe I've seen from a lot of people, and that includes from, like we say, the bit from Joey Lauren Adams. I like, I'm a fan of Kevin Smith anyway. I like his work, but I like a lot of people's work who they might be problematic. But at the end of the day, I like that because the reality of these sorts of things is he appears in the film. He would have had final say on whether he wants to sign off on that or not. And from what I know about him as well, I'd be surprised if he did, have any problem with that. Like, he seems like the kind of guy who wears his vulnerabilities and flaws on his sleeve kind of thing.
Yeah.
And is happy to just go, yeah, I fucked up, or maybe I'm not very good at that, but hey, I'll try and learn and, move on. But so I appreciate the fact that he didn't look amazing as like the hero filmmaker who made this amazing film that influenced their lives.
Yeah.
He didn't come off very well in a lot of ways, but then he came off well in other ways. So yeah, I really like that. And I really like how it does end up being more about Sav Rogers than the film itself as well. And like you say, more about how those things influence us and what it means in our lives, as opposed to what the people in our lives might mean, or, those sorts of things. And like, I like how his partner, Regina Rogers, she features in the film a lot because they've been together for a while and they eventually get married and all this kind of stuff. And it seems like at first she's not very happy about being in the film. Like, when she's being interviewed and stuff, she's kind of like, well, what do you want me to say? Like, fucking hell, geez, I don't want to be here. Like, But then she kind of warms up to it and kind of she's like talking to the camera in a way that makes you feel like Sav is perhaps not the one interviewing her at that point, so that she can talk more intimately about her opinion on things surrounding, Sav's journey and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's just a really honest and open discussion about these topics. And I think that's really cool and really important.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of that, with the relationship with the girlfriend there, Sav at one point literally says the movie was the life raft when he needed it. And the movie makes a very good point about it's not the life raft that he needs now. And it does end very wholesomely on him and his girlfriend moving on together. Yeah. Totally. No, it's kind of a perfect little bundle of just hope and wholesomeness, despite the bumps, like I said earlier, despite the ugly
I think that's
things.
part of it, because life is not all shiny, Like, there are shit bits, or there are, not everything is perfect, like you say. Like,
and I had this thought earlier, I fucking love that all of this revolves around a random goddamn 90s romantic comedy. It's not about some masterpiece that like begs to be interpreted and praised or whatever. This is all revolving around a random fucking 90s Hollywood movie. Really, really underlining the point that whatever forms and helps us doesn't need to be some grand thing. It can be whatever, and it can be appreciated as what it is. Yeah.
To be fair, I will say that when Chasing Amy came out, it did play in like art house theaters, and it was very successful for Kevin Smith. It was his first like big successful film.
Right. Okay.
So it wasn't too obscure or anything. It is nowadays, maybe, I don't know, and it does seem quite standard these days. But at the time, I think it was more art house because it was so heavy on queer themes and all that kind of stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It kind of got shifted off the mainstream. Whether that's good or bad is a completely different discussion. But anyway,
exactly. Yeah.
So, it is kind of a little bit interesting in those sense, and it's very much a cult hit or whatever. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It's nice that it's not, it's not like some great classic that everyone studies in university or something. It's just some film from the 90s that someone made.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly had a great time with this. I had this on my watch list already, but I'm glad you gave me the motivation to watch it now and not just have it rot on my watch list. This was really,
one thing
really
I'm
good.
interested in, I think it is, but do you think it was worth watching the film beforehand?
I don't think you need to at all. But for me, I do think it was worth it to have the full context because, again, I am very much interested in learning about how we as humans, take in and consume media, whatever. In that sense, I think it was worth it. And again, Chasing Amy itself, I don't think is a terrible movie at all. I enjoyed it. It was fine.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even knowing how and agreeing of why it's not the best.
Yeah.
Or perfect.
You can
is the point.
exactly, yeah. Like you can acknowledge that, and it's still not like it's still worth it for what it does well. There we go. That's it.
Well, I think that's art, though, isn't it? That's the whole point. Like,
Yes,
you can
yeah.
love something, or it can mean a lot to you, like a song or a book or a movie or whatever.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be some highbrow kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it could be very problematic, but it's meant something to you, and it's hopefully given you something to go with
Yeah.
that's positive and ultimately helps. So, hey, that's cool.
Hell yeah. Super
So,
cool.
what? Put a number on it then.
Yeah,
Let's
you
see how
know-
we go.
I think this is just going to be the episode of 9s. I think I'm going to go over 9 out of 10 again. I don't think it's like a perfect creation, but I think it's incredibly valuable. Yeah.
This is a 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
as far
fair.
as like we talk about how Chasing Amy might be flawed or whatever, but the documentary especially, I think there's nothing I would change about it, and there's nothing I would
Mhm.
critique it for. I think it's as far as storytelling as well, I think it tells its story in a very clear and understandable way,
Yeah.
with some surprises along the way and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, yeah, it's one that I've thought about a fair bit since I watched it, and it just keeps coming back up in my head, like, oh yeah, that was really cool, or that meant something, or and that to me is just priceless. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, this documentary
Yeah.
is going to be sticking around in my head for a while. I had some misty-eyed moments while watching it, for sure. It's a powerful
Oh
one.
well, that's why the Joey Lauren Adams interview, even talking about it now, kind of gets me a bit choked up, because like it's so just
Yeah.
beautifully honest and raw, and you can see how angry she is.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I really appreciate that, and I think that's just like one of the coolest bits of dialogue that they captured in the film, even though it's not 100% essential for the story, but it's definitely a part of the story and a very important part of it.
Yeah. Undoubtedly.
Good couple of docos then, I reckon.
Oh yeah,
we did pretty well.
I'm so happy with this episode. Like, this was some good stuff, for sure.
Like, yeah, we don't always get just glowing reviews all the way around.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Rock
Hell yeah.
and roll.
Movies rule,
Yeah.
man.
I mean, I'm a big fan of a good doco anyway. So
Yeah.
I have to say, I did have some skepticism going into Casting JonBenet, but it was all,
It walked
I
out.
was turned around easily and
Yeah.
quickly. So yeah, I'm really glad it worked out.
Hell yeah.
High fives all around.
High fives all around. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this means, though, that the next episode with our next picks can only be worse, probably.
I
Do we
know what
wanna-
I've picked. And
Yeah, well, I guess it's time to move on then to our upcoming theme. The randomly chosen subject for next episode is going to be something completely different. We're going into the territory of creature features. So probably delving into the horror genre or like the B-movie environment. Do you want to announce yours? You pick first?
I would like to preface this with saying that Matt here has seen way more
Right.
of these films than I ever have, because I don't know why, but as I was looking for films to pick, every single one I thought of, I like checked your letterbox and like, yep, you've seen it. So, it took out all the Godzilla films,
Right.
all the, even like other ones which are a bit more obscure. But anyway, I ended up on one which I'm actually genuinely keen to watch, although I expect it could be fucking awful. I have not seen
Okay.
it, so this is a thing, a new thing for both of us. It's a film from 2020, and it's called Monster Hunter,
The fuck?
directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. Monster Hunter, based on the video game of the same name. It stars Mila Jovovich. It also stars Tony Jaa, who is my favorite one of my favorite martial artists ever.
Yeah,
he's
he's
a
cool.
Muay Thai boxer who is a big martial artist in Thailand. He was in the Ong Bak series and The Protector and those sorts of things. I'm very keen to see him in there. It's got Ron fucking Perlman, who I'm also a big fan of. So, it's got all the ingredients for a big cheesy bit of fun that could be a bit shit. And it looks like, I watched the trailer, it looks like there's some big monsters, some impressive effects, that sort of stuff. So,
Motherfucker bringing a video game movie adaptation to the table.
Yeah.
That's true horror.
So, the director as well, Paul W.S. Anderson, he directed like the Resident Evil movies.
Right.
He directed Alien vs. Predator. So
Your
he's
favorite.
got a bit of. He directed Event Horizon, which I actually think is brilliant. I know you don't like it, but I love it. So he's got some chops. He did 1995 Mortal Kombat, which is an acquired taste.
Jesus, he did?
Yeah.
Oh my
God.
God.
This is an exciting one for me because I'm very keen to watch this. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critic rating is 44%, while the audience rating is 70%. So there's quite a disparity there, which often says we're in for a good time.
I don't know about that, homie.
But yeah, we're going to watch this and we're going to see how it goes because, I had a really hard time finding a monster film that I actually either you hadn't seen or I actually wanted to see as well. So this is where we're at. Monster Hunter, baby. Hell yeah.
I don't have high hopes for that.
It's going to be a wild time.
Well, if I'm going to have to suffer, I guess I'm going to have to make you suffer as well.
Yeah, motherfucker.
What would you do if I was right now announcing that my pick is Eight-Legged Freaks from 2002? Which has...
I told you.
I
told you if you picked a spider movie, I might not even watch it.
Yeah,
we had this discussion after we recorded last episode.
Yes, but that wasn't
for
official.
The audience.
We're on the mic now.
I know, but I did mention that if you pick a spider
tell me
film,
if you wanna do it.
I know the film. I've heard of it. Yeah, I know very well. I've avoided it like the plague because I do not like spiders. I am not a fan. They freak the fuck out of me.
I have a backup, but I wanna hear you. I want you to make the decision. I have a backup, but this is my initial plug. You decide, buddy.
I know I'll cut this out for those listening. It'll be short, but I'm just going to watch the trailer. Well, it depends. Is it like freaky or is it like campy?
Oh, it's super campy. I think it's a horror comedy. Actually, it's very B movie.
Well, I am watching the trailer right now. There's a child with a tarantula that jumps at him.
Hell yeah, buddy!
It says, "Do you hate spiders?" I do.
It is a comedy tagged as comedy.
There's a massive spider in the kitchen cupboard.
Lots of them.
Do you really hate spiders? It says. Now there's a giant spider eating an old man.
It's made for you, man.
Well, they don't like you either, the trailer tells me. Wow, so it's giant spider time.
Hell yeah. My favorite.
You know what? Giant spiders are probably less freaky than regular sized ones.
Hey, then you're gonna be fine. I think most of them are giant.
Yeah, they all look pretty big.
Yeah.
I guess because it's so unrealistic and,
Yeah. It's a big, dumb bullshit fest.
There's a guy with a shotgun yelling, "You eight-legged freaks."
Yeah.
Let the squashing begin, they say.
I think you're gonna love it.
All right, I'm not happy about it, but I'll do it.
Let's fucking go. Eight-Legged Freaks 2002.
I predict, ladies and gentlemen, next episode could be quite interesting.
Yeah, polar opposite of this episode.
Yeah, a hate-filled episode.
Fuck
we learn about what media means to us.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
I'm still not happy about it, but I'll do it. I'll find a sunny day. And yeah. Check it out.
I believe in you. You can do it, man. It's probably going to be not as bad as you think. Maybe it will help you in the long run.
Like I say, it is fortunate that they're all giants
Yeah.
If it was literally like just real life spiders, then I'd be like, fuck no.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
that would just fuel my imagination too much. And
Right.
And I live in a place where I often have to deal with spiders because.
With poisonous, actual dangerous spiders. I get
Well,
it. I understand. Yeah.
No, most of them are pretty harmless, but there are some nasty ones.
Right.
But there's just a lot about because I live not in an urban area. So
I'm gonna look forward to this therapy session next time. So
yeah, me for arachnophobia and you for video game movie.
shit.
Phobia.
Yeah. Oh gosh. All right. Well, on that note, the audience, make sure to leave your very cool comments under whatever you are watching this on. I don't
Tell us
fucking
how
know.
much you liked those documentaries before
yeah.
we get into the shit show, which will be next episode.
Exactly. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was Subjectively Correct, and we'll see each other next time. Bye-bye.
Adios, muchachos.